Hero rotations was one of the craziest ideas that Blizzard ever implemented. Every week there would be rotating characters that would just be banned out of rotation and you couldn't play them in every single role, and it had a dramatic change over the meta week after week. And with all the problems that we run into in Overwatch 2, is this a viable solution that Blizzard should bring back? Was it a terrible idea? Is there ways to tweak it to make it better? Or is it something else entirely? Now, Season 6 is just around the corner, and we're going to be covering everything, plus doing giveaways on this channel, so do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button right now so you don't miss out, and let's jump into it. Now, there was a time period of the game where there was problems with balancing. It felt like the game couldn't just catch its stride with having a good balance patch, and there were all these problematic metas popping out of nowhere, where they would leave one bad meta, and then they would just fall face first into a different bad meta, and with Blizzard mainly mobilizing for Overwatch 2, they implemented hero rotations where it would just ban 6 characters every single week, and it would be just a completely new meta, right? Sometimes they would ban certain tanks that just made it impossible to play dive or impossible to play double shield. Sometimes they would ban all the hit scans in the roster, and then flying characters would rule supreme. Sometimes they would ban characters like Mercy and Sombra, and there was just a really ever-changing meta all the time. It was like forced change in the meta, and it happened rapidly, so the game just felt completely different from week to week, and this happened throughout every rank, and it affected everybody. Now, this turned out to be a pretty bad idea, but it did have some pros. So let's break down the pros and cons and the ultimate verdict of hero rotations, and is there a way to tweak it to actually make it feasible in Overwatch 2? Well, the first pro is that it was super exciting week to week. Every single time you would play, it was just a new meta, and metas never really got solved because everything was just new and fresh, right? So even if you slapped into like a really bad meta, it didn't really feel that bad because you only had to play it for a week, and most of the time people weren't just forcing a certain particular strong meta until like the very end of the week, if anything at all. So you never really got tired of anything. You never really had to face something over and over again for like months straight, and that was one of the biggest problems in Overwatch 1 is it seemed like we would run into a meta that wouldn't go away for many months. I mean, we talk about Moth meta, we talk about Goats, we talk about Double Shield. There's just a million examples of these metas that just wouldn't leave, so a break from that at least was better than nothing, right? In addition to that, we would end up in certain metas that could never happen under balance because we just need certain characters to be gone for these metas to exist, right? When you remove characters like Widow, when you remove characters like Pharah or Tracer or certain tanks like Rhine or Diva, not saying that these are good things for balance, but you end up falling into metas that are just super unique and crazy that just never would exist otherwise. And it was kind of cool, although if your main got banned, you would definitely get really frustrated, which I will talk about more in the cons, but it was definitely something that was at least exciting week after week. Now, the last pro, and this is the biggest one, is this was way better than having a really shitty stale meta that just didn't get fixed for a long time, right? And that's the most important one, where instead of sitting in like a double shield meta for like 6 months, it was far better to have a chaotic meta, a wacky meta week after week than just being forced to slog through or get tired of a meta that just sucked, right? And at the very least, if you hated the meta in 1 week, or if there was a meta that formed at all, you could be like, all right, next week I can just play again and the game will be fresh and exciting again, and I don't have to deal with this week. And I think it made it so a lot of people were less burnt out on the game, and there was actually added interest in content creation. Back in the day when I was working for a different YouTube channel and I wasn't on my own, we would do weekly patch breakdowns, and those always did really well. People were excited and hyped about them, and it just kind of felt fun because it was always the new flavor of the week, right? But it couldn't last, and there were definitely huge cons that we're going to talk about right now. The first big con is that players really kind of adapt to certain characters, or they really like certain characters, and when those characters get banned, they wouldn't adapt and play other things. They would just not play. Like, Genji mains would just not play the game, or if you were a Rhine main and Rhine was banned, you would just not play. And it had some people just completely leaving. Now, it wasn't a huge percentage, but there would be certain patches where people are just like, all right, I'm out, I'm just completely gone. And I don't really think that's good for a game to have those things where the characters that you really like are just out of the game for a period of time. Yeah, come back next week. While that is keeping things fresh, it doesn't really feel that fun if you're trying to get better at a character, you're trying to practice a character, and then all of a sudden, they just don't exist in the rotation. That was really silly. It also kind of made it worse that sometimes the heroes that were rotated out were based on how good characters were, and it had the same set of characters sometimes rotating in and out because they were good, right? And that was kind of a frustrating experience that took away from the awe after a while, the randomness after a while. It kind of felt like it was just the same characters getting pushed in and out over and over again. Now, a big one is that this just felt like a band-aid solution to balance, right? Blizzard really kind of mobilized, like I said, to Overwatch 2. They didn't really balance their game. They had problems with balancing before, and this just felt like a big slap band-aid fix where it's like, this solution kind of sucks. I mean, it's better than us sitting in a really shitty meta for a long time, but just freaking balance the game and we don't have to do this, right? Don't make us sit into this freaking wacky mystery hero comp type simulator when you can just balance us into a good meta. You've done it before. It's possible. Stop band-aid solutioning this thing. And that's kind of what it felt like. And that really ties me into the last point where it felt like the game had no competitive integrity. And I do understand that Overwatch does feel like a casual game these days. It's not the most competitive game in the world, but a lot of us that really grind comp and want to get better, we want the most competitive experience possible. And having this heroes in, heroes out thing doesn't feel particularly competitive. Like a hero ban system would feel much more competitive because you get impact over who you pick and who you ban, and there's some strategy behind picking and banning and things like that, and that's a conversation for a different video. But doing it randomly or doing it based on like whatever was previously meta in the grand scheme of things didn't really feel very fair or competitive. It just felt silly at times, and it felt like they were trading competitive integrity for this constant stimulation and constant unpredictability that did get kind of old after a while. Now, also, there were certain situations where we would run into these metas that were obvious metas that were gonna happen, so people figured it out on day one, and they were very frustrating. Like, sometime they took away Diva and all the hit scans, and then out of nowhere, Far Mercy was just like impossible to deal with. You dealt with all the tools to counter a character, which I've already talked about in previous videos, why I don't think a duo of characters should require a very specific subset of the roster to be played in order to counter them, but that's another conversation for a different video. But regardless, when you take away those characters in the current state of the game, you just broke the game, right? Far Mercy with 0 Diva, 0 hit scans, what the hell are you supposed to do, right? You're supposed to cry. I mean, or you play Far Mercy Mirror and then it's like a Far Mercy battle. Yeah, it's just silly, right? There was situations like that happened where the balance just kind of crumbled and broke down. Could they have avoided this if they were thinking about things before they banned certain things? Probably, but they weren't even balancing the game and they were using this as a band-aid fix for the lack of balance anyway. So do you really think they were thinking that deeply into the heroes they were rotating in and out? No, they were not. Now, would a system like this actually be good in Overwatch 2? It didn't really work that well in Overwatch 1 and it was taken away eventually, but would it actually work or could it be tweaked to work? Now, I do think that in the current state of the game, it just would not work. I would much rather have a hero bans type system, and especially when we have solo tank, getting rid of a tank or rotating a tank out of the meta could just have some crazy implications for what's played and what's not. And maybe you could put a casual mode out there, but for competitive, having hero rotations doesn't really make sense. However, there's 2 situations that I think you could justify putting hero rotations in. So there's actually been talks that after a certain amount of seasons, they would be considered like a certain block or something. And then after that, there would be like a harder reset of rank. And you would have like, let's say a block rank. So like 3 seasons is a block, you get a block rank. And that's kind of like the big overarching blocks. And you have a lot less of those than seasons, right? But imagine at the end of every block, you get huge balance changes going into the next one. So as an example, during the hard seasons, there would be pretty big changes. During the mid-season, there would be smaller changes. And then during the blocks, there would be like reworks or like dramatic changes, right? But maybe at the end of every block or something like that, they would turn on the last 2 weeks as like heroes rotation. Maybe every couple of days, every 3 days. Yes, the game would feel a little bit wacky, but the idea would be to do it right before they're going to do a reset anyways. People don't really care about their rank. Everyone already knew it was coming, so they already got the ranks they wanted to do. And then they can use this as like a trial period where maybe they do random rotations or maybe they apply certain balance changes just at the end of the season so that we get a little bit of a feel for some things, how they would play out. We get to have something exciting, something fun. Because what always happens is like right before a big set of changes, like right now, for instance, right before Season 6, there's a huge lull in the community where people just don't really care about playing or grinding, right? So you could artificially kind of hype things up. And they actually do this at other games. The one I can think of the most is like Tarkov. Right before they do a big wipe in Tarkov, they allow all these bosses to like drop crazy loot and spawn on every map. And it's just like crazy stuff could happen all the time towards the end because the hard grinding is over. They're preparing for the next big set, the big reset. You could do something similar in Overwatch, and I could think hero rotations could fit in there somewhere. Of course, it would need all these other changes to go along with it. Now, the second way that I would say that heroes getting rotated in and out would make sense is in a situation where Blizzard completely abandons the game. Like, they step back, they completely walk away. They're like, hey, we're not going to balance this game anymore. We're not going to add any new characters. We're not going to do anything to the game at all. No new maps, no new nothing. We're keeping the game in its state forever. And yeah, the game would die slowly and people would stop playing it eventually, but you could put in some type of hero rotation thing in there every month, every 2 weeks to just keep the game a little bit spicy for people that are still grinding the game and playing the game. Maybe you would do it based on randomization or something like that, but something in place just when they fully abandon the game. I don't think that's ever going to happen to that extent, but that's what I would imagine. It's better than just like sitting in one meta. Imagine you were sitting in one meta that was not a balanced meta forever. People would just be like, all right, fuck it, I'm done, right? It would be better than that. It's better than that. Basically, it's a band-aid fix, sure, but if they're fully abandoning the game, yeah, by all means. But all in all, I don't really think that hero rotations make a lot of sense in the current landscape of Overwatch, and I would much prefer hero bans, but I don't know if we have enough heroes yet to justify hero bans, but we're going to be breaking all that down and talking about it in a future video. So if you enjoyed this one, definitely let me know in the comments down below, smash the like, subscribe, and let me know what big thing you want me to talk about next in the Overwatch community. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.